Hello everyone and welcome back to La Vida Fútbol. My name is Laureano. I'm a UEFA B licensed coach. Today's video, we're going to look into some tips for defending in the 4-4-2. So who is this video for? This video is for coaches who would like to get some tips with defending in the 4-4-2 and would like to implement some tactical ideas to their teams. And also for players who are interested in getting some tips as well for defending and who play in a 4-4-2 system with their team. So you will get some ideas and concepts as to when to defend, where to defend, where to move, things like that. So this is something for you guys as well. And then of course this is also for football enthusiasts who simply would like to learn a little bit about defending in the 4-4-2 and how it works, and hopefully in a game potentially identify some of the movements that we talk about here. So let's get started with shifting in the 4-4-2. In order to understand the shifting, we have to understand how we are set up. So here we have our backline of 4, which incorporates our 2 center backs, our left and right back. And then in the center of the pitch, we have our 4 midfielders who compress into the center to create a second line of 4. And then of course, 2 attackers who start the first line of defense. And this is of course 2 players, usually a winger and the forward, or the attacking midfielder with the forward. Or if you play in the 4-4-2 formation offensively, then these would simply just be the 2 forwards playing in that formation. So then when shifting in the 4-4-2, we have to pay attention to where the ball is and essentially move with respect to where the ball is. Okay, so now let's take a look. For example, here is the first bit of pressure, right? Once they start getting into the midfield, so into the middle third of the pitch. Once the opponents enter a certain zone, let's say for example this little zone here, then this is essentially when we start with our moving, because up until that point the center backs would essentially just be either dribbling or passing and trying to get up the pitch. But it's not until we get around the midfield that we want to implement some of these concepts that we'll be talking about today. So here we are in the position where we will start applying some pressure, very lightly, but essentially applying the pressure. So if the center back starts moving forward, we just add a little bit more pressure and start trying to cut off the pass to the other center back. But should that pass occur, the first type of movement that we need to look into is our forwards. So basically we do the V shifting for the 2 players, meaning this player steps up, this player steps down, of course diagonally, essentially creating a V movement. So we essentially switch positions there, and then now our other forward is applying the pressure, trying to cut off that pass to the other center back, trying to force it into the outside. Again, those are the first movements, and this is where the attack begins. The attack begins with our forwards, and that's essentially it, right? But as that happens, there is movement also in the midfield. So let's take a look at how this changes for us as well. So when the ball is there, our attackers are essentially the first ones to shift and make that movement. And the second line of defense here in the middle also starts moving a little bit. So we start shifting a little bit. So everyone shifts over just a tiny bit, right? Not exhaust ourselves so quickly, but just enough to understand that the ball is on this side of the field. And essentially we want to be closer to the players on that side of the field. And not only the second line of defense, but also our back line. We already start taking a few steps over to the other side and essentially are ready should the ball end up going to the left. Okay, so then that is essentially the movement. It's just a bit, but very important, because if the pass goes there, we don't want to be too far out where this player is so open that should they get the ball, they just run forward. But we also don't want to move not enough, because if we don't move enough, then like I said, the play is already on this side and essentially it just continues there. And then the run for this midfield player here is quite long and perhaps not enough. And if it's not enough time to get to this fullback here, then the fullback and the midfield player here, or the attacking midfielder there, can create a 2 versus 1 versus our fullback. Okay, so the shifting is quite important. It's quite simple, but again, there should be movement at all times. We should be alert as to where the ball is and where we are oriented. Okay, so then again, ball goes there, and then our V movement here, one forward steps up, the other forward steps down, and then we start shifting a bit in the other direction. Okay, and then the shifting occurs also in the back line, because again, we want to be ready for the passes that are intended to break our lines, and we just want to have enough players there should the ball come into these dangerous areas. And for example, with the 4-4-2, in between the lines there is a big space, so of course we want to be in position to interrupt the play should passes penetrate through the lines and essentially, break through. So again, shifting, very important. It's the first thing, and of course, like I said, it's very simple movement, but in a game it's a lot faster, a lot quicker, and this pass from center back to center back occurs a little bit quicker quicker, right? Because once we don't get there, it's essentially a pass back, and then the space here is available because we are just managing to shift over to this side and switch. That when the pass comes back to the other side, shifting back to this side can be a little bit exhausting. So when this happens, then we have our forwards not do so much pressure and allow them to make that initial pass. So then here's the next thing. So should that happen, center backs moving back and forth and trying to exhaust our forwards' legs a little bit, eventually they will start the attack. And here we are, the fullback here receives a pass, and then we start shifting. So now the first thing is, when do we want to put pressure to force the ball to the outside, and when do we want to put the pressure and force the ball to the inside? Okay, so now this is when things get a little bit interesting, of course, because here we have a tactical idea as to play to our advantage. Here, for example, if the pass comes to this either forward, depending on the formation that they're playing, or the outside attacking midfielder, then here we have a 1 versus 1. Okay, we do have support in the back. They have one attacker there, but we have 2 center backs versus 1 attacker here. It's a good numerical advantage for us. On the opposite side, you have a 1 versus 1, which is still okay because obviously the ball isn't there. It's just a matter of being focused and staying in line with the center backs for this right fullback here. But here in a 1 versus 1, this is when our player should of course trust themselves to beat this player on a one-on-one and force the game to the outside. So why do we force the game to the outside? Well, we want to force the game to the outside because the space here is thin, right? The line is simply a player for us in a sense, meaning should they dribble out, it's simply like getting the ball back, right? So this is what we want to do. We want to force them to attack on the outside and then force them to beat our player. And essentially we need to trust in our fullback that they can beat these one-on-ones. And there are going to be players that are so good that even if we have that advantage of 1 versus 1 very close to the sideline, some players are simply going to be too good, and we will not want that one-on-one because it would be an attack for the opponents every single time. But let's say it's a player that is good, but match between our fullback and their attacking player is even, it's fair, and there's a possibility for us to win the ball. Then of course that's when we want to have that pressure, forcing the ball to the outside, forcing that one-on-one, forcing that player here to really show their skills. Okay, so then that's one situation. But that's not always going to be the case, right? Teams adapt, players adapt. So then these players here will, for example, shift over, a situation in which now we have a lot more pressure in the middle, help coming in. Now, one thing we want to avoid is 2 players getting too close, because should 2 players get too close and leave a gap, then this player there can run through and then the pass can go there. So positioning is important here. If we're going to position to go to the outside, we got to make sure that this player stays behind to cut off that pass. Okay, so that is when the attackers come in to help a little bit more. So initially we do want to cut off that pass, but should this player stay a little bit more centralized, then here we have a numerical advantage between our fullback and our center back. And this is when we would consider forcing the player into the center of the pitch, because forcing the player into the center of the pitch into a crowded space in a 2 versus 1 is essentially a situation where we would like. So this is a good situation. We have 2 versus 1. Their other attacker is a little bit farther back, but that player is defended by one of our center backs. And it also, again, depends on how good this player is in attacking. But generally speaking, this is a good advantage for us to force that player into the midfield and to block the pass to the outside, because blocking the pass to the outside would encourage that player to go into the middle. But should we block the inside and we're shifted over, then this player can essentially exploit that space there, and that could essentially be dangerous. So we just need to be careful as to where our players are, where their players are, and then this will help us determine whether we want to force the play to the outside or the play to the inside. That's one thing right there. Okay, let's reset a little bit. Okay, so here the next thing is when the midfielders receive a ball from the center backs or from the fullback. This is when we start creating our triangle defense with the players that are side to side with us. So for example, here this player has the ball in the midfield, then one of our players steps up, our player here tucks in just a bit, our other player tucks in there just a bit. These 3 players create a bit of a triangle, leaving a little bit space on the outside in this particular situation, but not enough space so that if this player is to receive the ball, that they can simply just run forward. Of course, the first touch has to be quite good in order for them to really exploit that, but nevertheless it is a position that we want to be in. And again, it also depends on where we want to force the play. So because we have a player here, this is definitely a more dangerous place for this player to get the ball than for this player to get the ball. So we definitely want to cover the center a little bit more than the outside initially, but we want to have our player in a position where they can still get to that ball. Okay, so then should this occur, again, our players tuck in, create a little bit of a triangle. Backline also shifts, and they also do a little bit of movement where this player steps up, because the forward would essentially either be coming in to try to get get that ball there, or this player will come in also try to get the ball there. But we stay in our position, right? We don't overcommit anywhere. We look at which zone the ball is, and in this case it's for one of the center backs. So then this center back shifts up or moves up just a tiny bit, but not so dramatically, right? We also don't want to leave too much space behind there because this player can always come in behind. Okay, but just enough. Should this player receive the ball, then we have a player there for the pressure. But what we don't want is we don't want to leave too much space there in our defending in between players. So this gap right here is too big. This gap right there would be too big, okay? Because a pass there would be dangerous, right? Now that's 2 versus 2 here. And then if this player moves up, also dangerous. If this player moves up, also dangerous. So our positioning is important when we apply that triangle pressure, because we don't want to leave too much space in between. We don't want to give them that penetrating pass, because that penetrating pass is quite dangerous. So that is the one we are trying to avoid, okay? So we have to try to stay in control as much as we can, and by shifting and moving together and communicating, of course, that is possible. But this doesn't always work for us, of course. This is very ideal. This is not something that we will be able to manage in every situation of the game. There will be times in which the player here breaks through the line and then they are in full attack forward. So now when this happens, I think instinct tells you, let's push up, let's defend and move forward. But that is one of the most dangerous things that we can do, because a little flip over and a player running in would be costly for the team. Okay, so instead, because the gap here is still quite large, and here's what I mean by gap. By gap, I mean the space between the goal and our back line. It's still quite large, meaning there's still a lot of opportunity for players to play a ball there and to create an attacking situation against us. So this is when, instead of pushing up, when this player has broken through that line, we step back. Not that guy, player here. But we step back, we compress, and the first player to put the pressure is one of the midfielders that is closest. In this case here is where we apply the first pressure should they, again, break through that line. Okay, so one of the midfielders is the one that's going to try to interrupt the run, to try to put pressure and force a bad pass or force a bad dribble, a bad touch. So that is where we apply the pressure first. We don't want to overcommit, right? Because should this player overcommit, then of course it's no better than what we had before. Okay, so it's just to add that pressure and force an error, and essentially to allow us to get organized as well. But what's important is we cut off a pass here, because forcing a pass there allows us to shift while organized. Okay, but as we're stepping back, this pass there is quite dangerous, right? Because they will have very often 2 players ready for a penetrating pass like that one. Another thing as to when to put some pressure and when to step up. Well, a lot of the times when we are organized and the ball goes to the middle here and we have applied the appropriate pressure, center backs will open up, shift over to try to get a pass and try to restart should there not be any other options. And when this happens, when that pass occurs, then it's shifting forward, all of our players going up, and then we reorganize and we move in a synchronized manner, meaning everyone shifts, everyone pushes up, everyone moves forward, everyone, including the 2 forwards, attack, because only if we are in sync will this work appropriately for us, and which will give us an advantage, because we will be organized moving forward, they will be under pressure. Because if they're not under pressure and we move forward, what did we do with our space here? Well, we just gave them more space, meaning a lot more danger for long passes. So let's say our forward falls asleep. These 2 lines do a good job pushing forward, but our forward lacks a little bit of intensity or hesitates or whatever it is, but they don't get to that pass as soon as it reaches the center back. Then we have the potential of a long ball there. Or because we're on this side, obviously we will be shifting quite normally to respect to where the ball is. So then this player, if they have nice long ball, they can cross it to that side and attack through the other side. Regardless of what it is, we're allowing this player to receive the ball, and that is something that we do not want to do. That is it for this video. Just some tips for you guys to look into when defending in the 4-4-2. Again, for coaches, just some concepts and things that you guys can work on, or at least notice during a match, and correct some of these ideas and concepts should your players not do it correctly. And for players, again, these are just some movements, so you identify which player you are with respect to the tactics that I use here. Find your position and then look at some of the movements that we discussed here. Okay, but that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, comment that in the comment section below. Thank you for supporting, watching, and learning with La Vida Fútbol. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.